strings aren't where it's not string to be E. This is tuned up to a G. Because it's only got 4 chords, it's a little more difficult to do chord, things and do a lot of finger picking on it. It can be done. I do it occasionally. This one here is kind of my pride, one of my pride and joys. This is a lute. It's tuned similar to a guitar, except one string would be tuned a half a step sharp. Being a guitarist, I tuned it back down normal. So I could play like. Sounds like. Any questions about it? Notice the back. It's rounded, and it's made like that because originally they were brought over from during the 1100s, during the medieval Crusades. They brought back an instrument called a laut. Or nude rather, from the Muslim, the Islamic people, and they were like only 4 strings, and that's the shape they were in. It's like this, and they had the neck bend. You look at an idea why the neck is bent like that? That's how I do walk around with it sometimes. But yeah, it's a good idea. That was the way that in that time they could get the tension on the strings better. They didn't have all the engineering that we have now in our guitars and instruments. Pretty instrument. This one here is a Henricus. It's not very popular. This is very popular with the in the English chords and things. Every lord would have a lutenist. Every king had a guy that would come in and play lute for him. To be that lutenist for the king was just like to kill for. It was also to die for, to keep it like the music, and there were a few of them that did die for some reason. As far as I'm concerned, they can have that job. But this is a Henricus where, like I say, it wasn't real popular in the courts. It was very popular in the streets because it was loud, percussionist sounding, and you could play a lot of dance tunes. I'm going to play one that I've been doing this morning. People would come out and you'd always have a musician and a dance master. Sometimes the dance master would be the musician. And you would actually have what he called a pocket. Pretty interesting. If you go to Williamsburg, one of the musicians
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, play that because I know you know that one. Yeah, that's more what you hear on a lute. The lute was more for the kings and the lords, and that it was, they'd be playing songs that they'd write for them. Like in Ireland, famous harpists would travel around the country, around the islands and things, and they would actually play songs for a lord. They go into their place, the castle, the residence, and they live in a place for a while. And they might teach the children music, and they would write a song for the lord or the king or whoever. And they would end up, that'd be the way they'd make their living, the way they'd live. Some of them would be playing for lords, so they'd be dressed real nice. Some of them wouldn't have as high of a job, they wouldn't be playing for as high up echelon of a lord or something. They'd be playing for the lower echelon, and they might not be as dressed up as nicely. So sometimes when I come out, I dress up real nice, and people go, "You're a musician, you wouldn't have any money." Yeah, I know. But I have to work, so I have to put my money in my food, my clothes, and my instruments. And they became known as itinerant musicians. In the Americas, you'd have musicians who would travel around and teach music to children of farmers and pioneers and things, and that's how they would live, going from place to place. And usually they didn't dress up very well. And you also had your dance masters, because everybody danced. Nowadays people don't dance, and everybody danced, and they would have a dance master travel around and set up shop in one place, and he would teach whoever wanted to come how to dance. There was one popular instrument among the dance masters would be a very tiny fiddle. It was probably about this big, and he could stick it in his pocket, so it was called a pocket fiddle. And the reason for that was because that way he could travel around with it in his pocket or his saddlebag, and he didn't have to worry about having a great big lute. They're not very very good for traveling around on a horse with.
How many strings is it? Is it like 20 strings?
18 strings, 10 courses. Each pair of strings or three, some instruments have groups of three, is considered a course. Even if they're single, they're called a course. And the reason why these are single as opposed to the others is because in those days the musicians often made their own strings. It's called catgut. Nothing to do with cats, it had to do with those goats. I find it interesting they put the goats next to the musician. They would slaughter a goat, and they would take the intestines and they'd clean them, and they'd make their own strings out of them. Boiling them, stretching them, scraping them, drying them, and then going back and boiling them and stretching them again. And you could only get the strings, they might be in the same tune, but they may not be in the same tone at this high pitch. So they may sound exactly the same note, but they just would not sound right. So they ended up with a lot of instruments in that time period, string instruments, making singles. And then they pair up the others for volume. Some of these here are octaves, and some are just doubles. You find the same thing with this. It's a Renaissance guitar. Where did the guitar originate? Right. Well, you gotta know this. Spain?
That was my guess, but
Everybody usually knows that. Apologize. Spain. And the guitar is, the English didn't like the Spaniards very much. So you didn't find a whole lot of English men playing the guitar back then. But it's a very neat instrument. I keep forgetting to grab my picks, so you have to excuse me on this one. It's got 4 courses. The top one is single, as I said. And remember that all these instruments use friction tuners. So they're very difficult to tune. And the reason I tell you that is in a minute I'm going to show you the first first mechanical tuner. Play some finger picking melodies like you can on the lute with them, but it's a little more difficult having only 4 courses as opposed to 10 or 6 like in the guitar. So, this instrument here is a Portuguese guitar, as same as the original English guitar that George Washington bought for his niece, Rebecca. I believe her name was Rebecca. And it is the first one to have the mechanical tuners in it. If you look, there's a little hook, and the strings come up, and they got a little loop in them, and they hook onto this little hook. And you take a clock key and you turn it until you get it tuned right. And they tune them to an open C, and then you would stick them in a tavern. And the tavern keepers, cheap as they are now, wouldn't have to pay for musicians. As somebody pointed out earlier, they were first karaoke sessions because everybody would come in, and if you could just go 1, 4, 5, you got a melody. You got everything you need for playing music. That's what all the original rock and roll stuff was, 1, 4, 5 chords. Much of the tavern tunes are basically very simple tunes like that. Except, if anybody knows our national anthem, that was originally a tavern tune. Look it up. That was originally a tavern tune. Write it down. It's interesting. That's a string instrument. I've demonstrated those. This was a tabor drum. By hanging it on one shoulder and kind of hanging it out in the stomach or on the hip or something. I don't have big enough shoulders to do it. And then they could walk along and they'd play it. And they'd also, the other hand, they'd play a tabor pipe, which is similar to a recorder. And if you remember the story about the pipe piper, they believe that's what he was playing. This kind of an setup instrument to track the children and take them out. These 2 instruments, let me see, we got some kids, young ones here, I can't do the original. They were called knockers, N-A-K-E-R-S, and they were Renaissance era drums. You could get them with brass, sometimes wood, but not very often. Mostly brass and a mosaic or pottery type of material. Personally, I've dropped things, so I don't like pottery much. They don't last long enough for me to earn their keep. drums in those days were basically meant to be played to keep rhythm so you could dance. Remember what I said earlier, is everybody danced then. Everybody would go see the dance master. Even if you didn't have money, you'd work for him or something. You'd work your way to do it. So all the drums were meant to do was to keep rhythm. So when you go da 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 da, that's all they were doing, basically. And if you notice this drum here, it's early timpani style. So you have different tones in them, and you can tune them to some extent with these little straps on the thing. You can tighten up the heads or loosen it. Of course, it also helps a lot with this humidity that we got in the area to be able to change it too, because they'll go out of tune or out of tightness. And that's all I got right now. My voice is gone for a few minutes.